Nasrin Sotoudeh is a prominent lawyer in Iran who's been fighting for children's rights, women's rights, and human rights.
She is one of the bravest voices in Iran.
She took on cases that other lawyers were too afraid to take on.
We've seen Nasrin Sotoudeh jailed for defending human rights.
And it has cost her and her young family a lot.
Protesting against the law which forces Iranian women to wear the hijab.
The country's most prominent human rights activist and a voice for the voiceless.
I had been in Iran maybe a week, and I knew how to toe the line as a woman. And then I meet Nasrin Sotoudeh, who doesn't toe the line at all.
داستان یک عمریه که ما با این مسائل دست و پنجه داریم نرم میکنیم ولی اجازه نمیدیم که باز دست به خون دیگران آلوده کنیم.
On Wednesday, Nasrin Sotoudeh was again arrested. She had been tried and convicted in absentia. According to her husband, she intends to continue her activism from prison.
آزادانه بتونن تو بحثا مشارکت کنن اینه که این پرونده برای من اهمیت داره.
Again, I'm Christina Lowry. I'm so thrilled to be joined here today by four amazing individuals. And I would love for each of them to introduce themselves. Marcia Ross, producer of NASRIN, Celine Ozunaldum, an 18-year-old amazing gender equality activist from Istanbul, Maya Angulo, a human rights and gender equality activist, and Azadej Khalili, a feminist activist extraordinaire. I'd love for each of you to just tell everybody a little bit about yourselves. And Marcia, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Christina. And I just want to thank Girl Rising, Women Have Wings, you and Virginia, and everybody at Girl Rising, and Kristen and Eliza for having us here today. We've been really looking forward to bringing the film to Girl Rising, because I think it really speaks to a lot of what Girl Rising's mission is and what you're trying to accomplish in terms of young women and their voices and self-expression, which is all that NASRIN really stands for. So I am the producer of the film. I was also a casting director for a long time. So producing documentaries is a reinvented second career for me. And I would say that making films like this, and especially this film, is really life-changing and has really given my life a lot of purpose and very fulfilling, actually.
Thanks, Marcia. Celine?
Thank you everyone so much for joining in. Thank you Girl Rising and everyone who has contributed. NASRIN documentary has definitely changed my perspective to the world, to gender equity as an activist. I am Celine from Istanbul, Turkey. I'm an 18-year-old gender equality activist. I am the youngest representative of UN Women's Global Gender Equality Movement, he for she, and also one of the 300 young activists who were chosen by the United Nations to become gender youth activists. And as National Gender Youth Activists, we're working closely with UN Women and on the Generation Equality Forum. Also, I am a guiding group member of United Nations Girls Education Initiative's Transform Education campaign, where we get in touch with policymakers and action coalition leaders to transform education for good. My connection and network with Girl Rising was actually started this summer. I was a member of Young Leaders Task Force for 4 months, which was once in a lifetime opportunity for me. It's made, like, it was the best summer for me. It was a huge honor and privilege. And I know Maya, who was also one of the members, can relate to this. Thank you so much for having me. This is a huge honor and privilege.
Thanks, Celine. And Maya, over to you.
Hey, hi there, everyone. As Celine said, I'm really excited to be here with everyone today to discuss this really incredible film and Nasrin's extremely inspiring story. I was deeply moved by it, and have been still thinking about it and processing it, and it's been a bit since I've watched it. So to introduce myself, as I said, I'm Maya. I use the she, her pronouns. I'm from and currently located in Los Angeles, California. I'm in my final year at Occidental College, where I study diplomacy and world affairs and have a minor in gender, women, and sexuality studies. So most of my work thus far in life, I mean, I'm only 21, but thus far has focused on women's rights in the context of international law, mostly human rights law, development, and norm entrepreneurship. So how do these ideas move and become realized? How do we come to understand that, you know, gender rights are something that needs to be happening, that they need to be achieved, because we haven't always thought this way. And so specifically for me, what's important is collecting the local to the global, and then the global back down to the local. So I think it needs to go both ways. And so my work has been throughout the spectrum of all that. So here in my own communities at my college, I've also done some work for the UK mission to the UN. And currently I'm working on a task force with the Los Angeles Mayor's Office on how to implement SDG 5, so the Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equity at Los Angeles in our specific local context. And so as I said, as Celine said, I was a member of the Young Leaders Task Force, and that was a really amazing experience that allowed me to meet so many incredible people like Celine. So I'm really excited to be back here today with Girl Rising and some other really inspiring folks on the panel to talk about Nasrin's story.
Thanks, Maya. And Girl Rising was definitely the lucky ones with both of you on our task force this summer. And Ozzy, how about you?
Yeah, hello everyone. It's an honor to be here. My name is Azadej Khalili, and I was born and raised in Iran and came to the US as an activist feminist. Presently I am the communications secretary at the NGO Committee on the Status of Women in New York. We organize the civil society side of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Every year, over 10,000 women gather together from around the world to exchange best practices. Previously, I was the executive director of the Commission on Gender Equity in New York City. Again, I want to thank Girls Rising and Women Have Wings, and it's wonderful to be here on behalf of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much. So I know we're joined by a lot of people today. I don't know how many people have had the opportunity to see the film Nasarin. It's available now. Marcia will tell you how to watch it. But I wanted to start with you, Marcia. What an extraordinary human being Nasarin is, and what an extraordinary film you've made. I'd love to start by just asking you, when did you first learn about Nasarin, and what inspired you to make this film?
Well, I first learned about Nasarin actually through my partner, Jeff Kaufman, because he had made a film called Education Under Fire about the persecution of the Baha'i faith in Iran. Because those of you who don't know, in Iran, people who are of the Baha'i faith cannot be educated, they're persecuted. It's really horrible and for them there. And Nasarin has represented Baha'is like she's represented many other minorities, women, LGBTQ, children, people on death row. And we were both really taken with the idea that this was a Muslim woman defending her Baha'i friends at great danger to herself. And we thought, this is a story that really needs to be told. And so we approached Nasarin and Reza, I guess around early in 2016, to ask them if they would be interested in having a film, made not just about her, but because she wouldn't want that. That's not who she is. The story is focused on her, but on political prisoners and the people that she defended. I mean, during the making of the filming, she did get arrested, as you will see in the film, because she was defending the young women who were protesting the mandatory hijab law, and they were taking their headscarves off in public. So that was sort of a big thing that happened about 2.5 years into making the film. But I think for me, particularly with her story, she's such an extraordinary person. I mean, what she has done what she has done for so many other people and the future of Iran, and a role model for women in Iran, was very, very important to me, what she stands for. And I also believe, because I've seen this, that history often is written by others. And I have seen, and this has been something that I've been important to me in the films that we've made, that the role of women in change in our society is often written out of that history later on, you know, by men who write this history. And so it really became really important for me to make sure that her story is told and what she has done is told, so that no one else gets to tell her story but Nasreen.
Well, and as a fellow filmmaker, I'm amazed by just the logistics that went into making this film. Many things recorded in secret. Can you tell us a little bit about the actual making of this film and what it entailed for you and Jeff?
Yes, thank you. So it was complicated because Jeff had also made several films about Iran. And so if we went there as American filmmakers, we would have been arrested instantly. It would have been impossible. And also, just even if they didn't know who we were, but we were an American film crew on the streets with Nasreen trying to capture this intimate portrait of her life, we would have also been arrested, or they would have put a stop to it. So, and that's what we really wanted. We wanted this kind of intimate portrait. And so we were able to find people who at great risk were willing to follow her around with cameras at work, at home, you know, with her family in the courts, you know, family visits at prison, things like that. We were able to find people, they remained anonymous. Many people who worked on this film, not just the cameraman, decided to remain anonymous because they have family, as Ozzy knows, in Iran, and it's dangerous for them. So that was how we did that. And then we also traveled around the world and we interviewed people that live in exile who can't return to Iran. And we also did a lot of research on archival footage and things that are on, you know, you can find, which are amazing. I mean, in both the Farsi language and the English language, because there's a lot out there. And I think when you see the film, it's really fascinating is how many people attended these events and were video, you know, they had their cameras and they had their cell phone cameras and they had their iPads, and they were actually filming a lot of these activities right there. And then we had a kind of a detective job trying to actually find this stuff so that we could find a way to integrate it into the storytelling. The other thing as a filmmaker, which you know, which all of you know, is raising money to make an independent film and documentary. It's very, very difficult. And one of the most important things that we felt was protecting Nasreen. And we asked her many, many times, every time we spoke to her, are you sure you're okay? Because if anytime you don't feel this is safe, you're not comfortable, then we're just, you know, we're going to stop. And she, you know, no, every time she said, no, keep going, I want to keep going. So that became, and then we didn't really want people to know that the film existed until it was really ready for the public to see it. So we also had to raise our money. We couldn't do any kind of crowd sharing or public fundraising. We had to raise it that way. And I think lastly, I'll just share, because when you make a film in a foreign language where you don't actually speak the language, I've learned a few words of Farsi since I started working on the film. But, you know, that was also a big challenge because we were receiving footage that were slipped out of Iran through various connections, sort of turning up in no order, no rhyme or reason. Months would go by, something would just turn up. And we would then transcode all the footage, but it was all in Farsi. So it wasn't until then we worked with some wonderful translators, until we worked with the translators, and then we got back the transcriptions, that we actually knew what was being said. And from that, the script came out of that. And then finally, we worked with our editor, and we also worked with our Farsi translator to make sure that the Farsi that you hear, that you hear also in the subtitles, it really matches. And I think Ozzy can tell you that in Farsi, one thing can mean 5 things. It's not, you know, I love what you're wearing. That can mean a lot of different things. There's a lot of different aspects of that. And that was a really interesting part of discovery. And for me also, just this incredible exposure to the Iranian culture and to Iranian people, both through making the film with the people in the film and the people we met, which to be honest, and Ozzy, again, I address this to you simply because I think the most life-changing thing for me of all things making this film, not just getting to know someone like Nasreen, was meeting people who have had to leave their country and cannot return, and what that really means.
Thanks, Marcia. I have lots more questions for you, but I want to go to Celine and Maya. You both have accomplished so much at a relatively young age. And I'm curious if there was, what sparked you to your activism and how you've channeled your interest in human rights and gender equity into concrete action. Maya, do you want to start?
Sure. So for me, I grew up where my grandparents would pick me up from school and we would go home, have dinner together, and they would tell me all of their incredible stories around the dinner table. And so my grandparents come from immigrant backgrounds. I have a grandfather from Cuba and then two grandparents from Mexico. And so they would tell me about, how my grandfather came from Cuba during the beginning of the Castro regime as political refugees. And then on my other side of the family, how my grandparents struggled to get an education. I think the highest education they have is middle school. And so I would be hearing all these stories. And at a young age, I didn't really understand that many of these issues were still ongoing. And then when I started to learn about them, I became very angry. And so that started to drive a passion to want to do something. And I was very fortunate that my parents were very supportive of whatever it is that I wanted to do. And so they're like, okay, you've got it, do what you need to do. And so coming into school, I began to learn about human rights as a concept. I hadn't heard those words before. All I knew was the experiences that people around me had been sharing, which we know is a valid form of knowledge, but it's always good to have like some words to put into perspective everything. And so then I started to work on projects. So starting with my school's UN week, looking at gender, sexuality, and collective action, creating a whole photo project on the community members and their experiences to really highlight how the global things that are happening do affect the local. And then just bringing with me throughout any NGO work, UN work, a really feminist human rights-based approach that connects intersectionality and centers local actors in everything that I want to do and that I will do.
Great, thanks, Maya. What about you, Celine?
So I believe since I was a child, I have always been interested in the concept of being equal to one another and laws and social constructs, gender norms and gender roles. And I always knew I wanted to do something. But, you know, as Christina, you have mentioned, sometimes you just need one spark to turn it into a flame, one specific motivation. So for me, that was when my, back then, I believe, 6-year-old little brother told me that I didn't really have to worry about school because if I couldn't get into a good college or if I couldn't get a good job, I could just simply get married and my life would be so easy. And I was so lucky in that sense. And I remember how shocked I was because even a 6-year-old little child could have this kind of a thought structure, kind of mindset. And it was really shocking to me because
I'm having the cake with ice cream.
It's okay, keep going.
Because, you know, there were no experiences like that in my own family or in my own circle. But it was so normalized in our community. It was so normalized in the society that even a 6-year-old little child could have this thought in mind. So that was the moment when I said, okay, this has to be changed. And I am going to be the one who changes it. And afterwards, I remember like one day later, I got in touch with UN Women and wanted to get involved in their He for She movement. So that is how my He for She journey and UN journey has started. But as an activist, day by day, you find more things that has to be changed. And one of the things for me, one of the issues was the disproportion and the patriarchy in the STEM field. And it is, again, like very much brushed under the carpet. We don't even realize how gender roles are still exist in STEM fields. So that is how I have brought the Girls to Code movement to Turkey. And as Girls to Code Turkey, we're aiming to teaching the basics of coding to young girls and also to show them the fun side of science. And of course, I have to kind of talk about the pandemic in Turkey. I have, of course, always been interested in equal access to education. I knew it was a problem for sure, but I have I can't say that I have ever witnessed such a thing, because circling back, I'm living in Istanbul, and I am going to a private school, and I have more opportunities and resources than many of the young girls have in Turkey. So especially with the pandemic, it was a time where I could really like take a step back and realize the privilege that I have in terms of education also. So I would say, especially with the pandemic going on, and getting in touch with Girl Rising and being a member of the Young Leaders Task Force, definitely gave me a chance to kind of, how can I say, kind of take a step back and also start my work start working on SDG 4 and link it to SDG 5, which is equal access to education and gender equity. So at the moment,
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that struck me so much as I watched the film was clearly what a powerful role model Nasrin is to young activists, young women activists in Iran. And I'm curious, Celine and Maya, what parts of Nasrin's story did you find especially inspiring? Maya, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So first and foremost, her courage. I think anyone who watches the film, immediately you can see and tell how brave she is. And I know this is really great. Maya Angelou quote, I know my name sounds insane. It's a coincidence that I just love this quote. But she says that courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. So without courage, you can't do any work. You can't do anything. You have to take those first steps. So I think in that way, Nasrin's very inspiring to me, in that, okay, you can do it. Just take that first step and the ball starts to roll. I mean, even Celine said, you have that spark, just fan it into a flame. It's there, fan it. And I think also the way that she works within the law is very interesting to me as someone who has worked inside of institutions. And so I think a lot of feminist critique, there's a lot of feminist critiques of whether or not do we need to create a whole new institution, or can we even reform the current institutions that we have? And so I think Nasrin's story really interrogates what can be done within and outside of the law. And I think I know for myself, that's something that I'm processing as an activist, as a student of human rights. So it's really cool to see someone actually utilizing the law in such a way that she is making progress. She is making major power moves, honestly, and creating change. And you know, she's not doing it alone. You see around her, and the story highlights really clearly that she's working with other activists. And I think that just highlights so much the importance of coalitions and collective actions, both within our local communities, and we see around the world people supporting Nasrin. I mean, that's us here too. It's extremely inspiring.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks. And Celine, before we go back to you, I actually want to go to Ozzy now. Nice segue from what you just said, Maya. And Ozzy, you were born in Iran. You later moved to the U.S. What was it like for you to watch this film? What were you most compelled by?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you know, Nasrin and I are contemporaries. We were both teenagers during the Iranian Revolution. And Nasrin and I both stand on the shoulders of our mothers and great-grandmothers who fought for women's rights. So watching this movie really reminded me that Iran has a long history of women's activism. Women's movement began in 1890s when women joined a movement against colonization in Iran. And by 1905, women's voices were organized. And by 1910, we had the first women's journal. And by 1963, we won the right to vote, you know. And women have fought hard for our right to get an education. Today, you know, 97% of women in Iran are literate, and 60% of students in the university are females. None of this came easy to us. We women had to fight so hard. And Nasrin has been involved in this movement from the very beginning. You know, in 2003, human rights lawyer Shirin Ebadi was awarded the Nobel Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize. And I know that Nasrin worked for Shirin at one point. So no other constituency in Iran is more organized, more united, more committed to fighting for their rights than women. So since the Islamic Revolution, we've seen the 1 million signature campaign, which has been huge, and we've seen the hashtag White Wednesdays campaign. So I find myself connecting with Nasrin as a fellow human, as a mother, as a feminist, as a women warrior, and as a human rights defender. And I think what's most compelling about the movie is that Nasrin is portrayed as both a humble, regular woman and a force to be reckoned with, who refuses to be silent, even behind bars. And this movie really mobilizes an urgent response of international solidarity for Nasrin and other human rights defenders who are tortured, imprisoned, killed for fighting to bring about radical change for women and girls everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ozzy. And I know that, I know, Maya, you had a question for Marcia. I'd love for both you and Celine to get to ask questions yourselves of both Marcia and Ozzy. So Maya, why don't we start with your question for Marcia?
Sure. I guess it kind of Ozzy led into it really well in this portrayal of Nasrin. And as Marcia, you were saying earlier, history so often is written by others, especially men. And we know that documentary filmmakers play such an active role in shaping how we as like the outside world who may not have as much knowledge on these issues or on activist movements and activism themselves. So I'm wondering, as a producer, how has your personal relationship with Nasrin and those around her informed the narrative that you create on the social movement for women's rights in Iran?
Thank you. That's such a good question. I mean, well, we just touched upon it. It was really important for us to create her as a full human being. That's one thing that's really important to me, is that we all share a common humanity. I think one of my favorite things in the entire film, and there are many favorite moments I have, is when you see Nasrin with her son Nima. Mm-hmm. And she's picking him up after school, and he's got his backpack, and they're, you know, holding hands and they're walking home. And I think, to me, that's a scene you can see in every country in the world, mothers with their children walking them home from school. So that was a really critical thing for us, our common humanity that we all share with people around the world. I believe very strongly that we often only know other countries through what we hear from the government. And as you probably know, you hear Iran constantly. It's in the news all the time now, obviously for reasons that we all know. And we as Americans frequently only know Iran because of what we hear going back and forth, the saber rattling between the two governments. But actually, there are wonderful people with an incredible culture and an incredible history, by the way, of feminism, and that we don't get to see in the midst of all this politics. So as filmmakers, we want to show that humanity. We wanted to show the people of Iran. We wanted to really balance the reality of Nasrin's life, you know, with also her work and living in the culture and with her and her friends. And she has so many female friends and co-workers and people that she cares deeply about. I think creating a full picture of a person is extremely important in terms of how you relate to them. I don't think you can relate to someone if you don't see the fullness of them.
Well, I think that you did an extraordinary job, and Nasrin, the picture of her and what we got to take in as audience members was a woman of such enormous heart, in addition to this, you know, incredible intellect and strategic mind. But I found it so lovely to see different aspects of her as she interacted with different people in her world, from her children to the young women who she supported, to her dependents, to her husband. So I really think that you all did an expert job at that. Celine, I think you also had a question for Ozzy.
Yes. So Ozzy, as activists, there are challenges and difficulties that each of us has to face and tackle to overcome. But in your case, when politics come into the picture, activism transforms into a very different dimension. So my question is, what was a bigger challenge you have faced? Was it raising awareness and waking up the public to unite? Or was it with politicians and getting them to pass the laws to give the rights and freedom the citizens need and deserve?
That's an excellent question, Celine. Well, as activists, there are challenges and difficulties that each one of us have to face and tackle to overcome. In I think that you summarized the key challenges pretty well. And in my time in government, I definitely encountered all those challenges. As an activist, when you go into government, you encounter a new set of opportunities to bring about large scale change, but also you face a whole new set of constraints. Like when I was the head of the Commission on Gender Equity in New York City, we were able to provide free sanitary napkins to girls in public schools, and we were able to reduce absenteeism drastically among 500,000 girls. The constraints I faced were through our budget office, and we had to fight them because they kept telling us there was no money to provide sanitary napkins to girls in the public school system. And we had to keep going back and saying, no, we don't take that, we don't take no for an answer. And ultimately, activism in government is about vision, it's about courage, it's about persistence, never taking no for an answer, and building relationships, and when you go inside government, you must go in as a change agent and as someone who never settles for the status quo. The strengths of our relationships with other government staff and officials is key to moving our agenda forward. Again, in my case, I have fought I really think that it's absolutely essential to maintain the alliances with the activists outside of government. Sometimes when I couldn't move something forward, I really needed the activists from outside of government to demonstrate at the city hall or write an opinion piece or make a documentary to get my bosses who were the mayors or governors to really change their mind and so that we could have the political will to move our agenda forward. And I think that government needs more than ever in New York City, in Washington, in every corner of the world, government needs more young women like yourselves, activist young women with hope and vision and determination and integrity to fight for change from the inside.
We, of course, at Girl Rising believe so deeply in the power of storytelling to spark change, to change the way people think, to change the way people act. And I'm just curious quickly from Celine and Maya, when you watch Nasrin's story, how does it inspire you in terms of your education, your aspirations? Celine, why don't we start with you this time?
Yeah, for sure. So as I have previously mentioned, after watching Nasrin's documentary also, I took a step back and realized my privilege again. I remember being starstruck by Nasrin because she was so driven, and she just she was fighting for people. She was defending people who didn't have the same opportunities and resources I had, but she never gave up. She was being arrested. I can't even imagine being arrested, but she never gave up. She was even doing her activism work, and she was speaking up even though she was in prison. So especially those parts, and also getting the chance to see her as a human being, as a mother, as a friend, as a woman, it really it had a huge impact on me. And in terms of education, again, she and her work inspired me to pursue my activism work and work more on the forefront for equal access.
Thanks, Celine. What about you, Maya?
Sure. So yeah, as Celine said, the power of voice and the power of action for sure. And I know for me, I'm 21. I'm going to be graduating college in a few months. I mean, fingers crossed. And that's kind of daunting. That's kind of scary. I mean, I admit to those emotions. And I think right now I'm very much in the stage of, okay, which path do I want? And feeling like I can't have everything that I want. But then I see someone like Nasarin, who is a mother, who is deeply connected to her family and her community, and is out here using the law, using her education, using her skills, her voice, everything. And she's doing it all, and it's all achievable. And I think sometimes it's hard to find those examples in modern media still, in modern culture still, seeing women in particular who both have families, who are doing work, who are doing everything that they want together. And it's not an if or situation. And for me, as I'm going into that stage of my life where I'm trying to determine what exactly do I want to be doing, what's the next 5, 10, 15 years and so on, it's really incredible to say, okay, you have some ideas and you can do them. You can do all of them if you want to. And that's what's been really important for me and learning from Nasarin.
Thanks, Maya. I want to go to a particular aspect of the film, something that I believe often can bring a film to life, which is the music. And the music that is featured in Nasarin is likely to be nominated for an Oscar. The song is written by Tony Award-winning composers Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty. I wonder if, before Marcia, I have you comment on it, if Virginia could play the music video that we have.
I tell you my truth, little one? How can I tell you the things I have done? Though I cannot see the sky, you know, I only think of you. And you shine for me more brightly than the sun. And how can I tell you the tears I have shed? Are you still lonely each night in your bed? I could tell you to forget me, but the words would not be true. And I love you always, even if you do. Story with love, Nasarin.
a powerful and moving song and images. Marcia, tell us a bit how this song came to be, and talk to us a little bit about how you approach music in your films and as an aspect of storytelling.
Well, first of all, the score itself was written by Tyler Strickland, who I thought just did an incredible job. And I find that music is incredibly important. I mean, people say, you know, film is such a visual medium, but I think it's also an auditory medium too. I think there's not enough sort of credit given to the idea that, yes, you see things, but the power of music also enables you to feel things that you don't even know that you're feeling. It moves you in all kinds of ways. I mean, yes, you know, a lot of these action films have, you know, pounding scores, and they're very exciting, and you know that as sort of revving up the activity. But there's also this real great power in feeling that comes through us through all of our senses. And so that is something, you know, Jeff and I talk a lot about with all of our films. You know, we want to keep people in the feeling that they're looking at. So that's one thing we do from the scoring the film. But the song, we never actually had an original song in any of our films. But as you know, when you make a film, there's so many things that you can't use. You know, you have to make choices, you know, because otherwise we'd have a miniseries really. So we had these beautiful letters that Nasreen had written to her children from prison. And we thought, well, what are we going to do with these letters? Because there's no place for them in the film. We have some wonderful things that she said that are in our film. The great Academy Award-winning actress, Olivia Colman, who plays, you know, Queen Elizabeth on The Crown, she reads some of Nasreen's things in the film, but these letters, what can we do? And we thought, well, maybe they would make a good, you know, we can do something with them. And we met Stephen Flaherty and Lynn Ahrens making our last film, which was about Broadway theater, and the great playwright Terrence McNally, who also had written the books for several musicals. And Lynn and Stephen had actually written the scores for Ragtime, which is an incredible show, and Once on This Island that recently won a Tony as well, and lots of other shows. And so we approached them, and we sent them a rough cut of the film along with the letters, and they watched the film, and they called us right away, and they said, hey, you know, we're in. What can we, you know, let's write a song. So they wrote the song, and Lynn always loves to tell this story, but you know, she was really inspired by the letters. Stephen apparently wrote the music first and then sent it to Lynn, and she then wrote the lyrics. And then they called us and they said, okay, we're going to play the song for you. And Jeff and I, of course, you know, they were nervous because they were singing it, and as Lynn says, she doesn't sing. And of course, Jeff and I were nervous because, of course, these are legendary, you know, they've been nominated for Oscars and for Grammys and for Tonys. Oh my God, you know, we hope, you know, we want to, hope we love it. What are we going to do? You know, what are we going to do? So, and then Lynn started to sing, and Stephen played the piano, and we were just blown away. We were so over the moon and so impacted. I was crying, both of us. I was crying on the telephone. I was crying while she was singing the song right there, just like that. And I think one thing I never forget is that song never leaves me. Whenever I hear it, it's in my mind. You get the lyrics and the tune, it gets inside you very, very quickly. You know, you have those songs that you wake up in the middle of the night and it's going round and round in your brain. That's that song, I find, for me. And then we thought, well, we need to find someone wonderful to sing it. We had a wonderful temp track that we did, which was great, but we thought, you know, we wanted to bring someone in who also felt a special connection. And for those of you who don't know Anjali Kidjo, she's a 4-time Grammy winner. She is a world-renowned singer, but she's also, she's a UNICEF representative. She's a human rights defender. She has an incredible background and history and resume, not just in music, but also human rights. And she knew who Nasarin was. And Jeff and I watched a bunch of her things, and I think we saw her sing at the G7 in front of all the world leaders in front of the Arc de Triomphe, where there was an empty seat for Nasarin. You know, that's it. And we were so lucky. We were able, through mutual friends, to get to her, and she loved the song. And when she sang it, she really made it her own. I mean, that was incredible, because the music's the music and the lyrics, but then she added just sort of a intenseness of passion, you know, kind of a combination of emotion and anger to it that just makes it completely come alive. We're just so honored and thrilled. And again, I think we just felt also like anything that we can do to bring attention to Nasarin herself is what our goal has been always with this film. And so we have this opportunity, both with the film and the song and the music video, to just keep creating other opportunities to introduce people to Nasrin, the person.
And before we go to audience questions, I just wanted to ask the other panelists if anybody else had a reaction to the music that they'd like to share. Ozzy, I know you also know Angelique, and anybody have any reactions?
I absolutely loved the music, and I too cried. It's hard not to cry, and I think it's good to cry. And these are tears of both connection and joy. And I love the idea of one human rights defender, one woman human rights defender singing for another woman rights defender. It's a beautiful, beautiful model. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have a couple questions here I want to ask from the audience. Ozzy, the first one is to you. Our participant says, I'm a young female activist who's currently based in Iran, and most of my activism has been through social media. What advice do you have for girls like me to make more of an impact?
Well, I think it's hard for me to give you any advice. You get to choose what you would like to do and take those steps. But every young woman needs to have a support system, a group of young women, a group of women who will back you, who will support you, who will listen to your thinking, so that you continue to develop your mind and your vision and continues to stay in the fight and persist against the oppression. I would like you to, many of us speak of courage, and courage really comes from being connected to others. Courage comes from knowing that you're backed and that you're not alone, and that in those moments when you're being beaten back, you have all your sisters, you have a whole movement behind you supporting you. So I will say, keep doing what you're doing. And I would, you're welcome to also stay connected with me and any other women that you wish to back you and mentor you and support you.
Thanks, Ozzy. And Marcia, do you have any thoughts on that question also?
Well, I think, right, getting active, I mean, I really believe I'm so thrilled to be joining everybody today and to see, Maya and Celine, because it's so impressive to me that people start at a young age. I think it's so important. It's an important thing. The world needs people to be active, because nothing's going to change, and we have to keep moving things forward. We also, on our website, NASRINfilm.com, we have a link to a petition that PEN America has set up and has reached hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and has been really active in advocating for Nasrin's release from prison. And the best thing we can do for Nasrin actually is keep making a lot of noise about her. The other thing that's on our website are live links to different organizations that actually do human rights work. So you can sign the petition. You can also click on to something else, and you can join an organization that way, or read what the organization, Girl Rising, is on our website as well. So there's so many organizations doing incredible work, and just doing one thing, that's all it takes. If everybody does one thing, we can really make a difference in the world. And also on the website, you can sign up for our newsletter, because we are constantly updating with news about what's happening to Nasrin, what activities are going on to support her, and what's going on with the film. The film, by the way, is now out. It came out 2 days ago. It's on streaming. So if you have Amazon or iTunes or Google Play or Vudu or any of these streaming platforms, you actually can see the film right after you watch this if you haven't seen it yet. So we're really, really excited the film's now available for everyone to see.
Thanks, Marcia. And another question that I know I had in watching it, and I know other people have, is how is Nasarin? How is she doing right now?
Well, it's not really great. I mean, in the summer, and that's something that really speaks of Nasrin. I mean, she's always focused on other people. She's not about Nasrin. She is always about other people. And so she went on a hunger strike over the summer. It was almost 46 days of a hunger strike to protest the conditions of being in prison, because it's awful and it's dirty and there's COVID and a lot of other things there. It's just they don't really look after the prisoners. And so when she came out, she has a heart condition. And so they let her out on a short, medical furlough, but then it was found that she had COVID and she gave her whole family COVID. So because of it, because she didn't know. And so she was able to be home for about a week or so, and she was able to get better, took her back to prison. And then they moved her to Garshak prison. And Garshak, is so much worse and so much filthier and so much more awful than Evin. She came home recently on another medical furlough because she had an angiogram, and it helped, but they thought they were going to extend it, the furlough, and then they just took her back. So she is back in prison, but she's fragile, and we worry about her all the time. Spending almost 5 years with the family, they've become like family to Jeff and me. We speak to them, we talk to them. We were able to speak to Nasarin several times when she was home on medical furloughs, which was unbelievable to see her again after she was taken away. But, we're really concerned. She's really strong. And whenever she comes out, she focuses on what this can mean for other people, but it's not good.
And again, in terms of what we all can do, you mentioned the petition. Is there anything else that you would advocate for the people on this call to be able to do to help free Nasarin?
I think there's, write to your Congress people right now, because the United States government, Tony Blinken was just named, Secretary of State, and there's a lot of talk about going back into the Iran deal one way or another. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's an opportunity for our government to advocate for human rights there and to help all these people. Iran is filled with human rights prisoners who've done nothing more but take off their hijab in public or wear a button. There's no rhyme or reason to so many of these people being in there. And I think the United States needs to set a world example for everyone else about human rights. And if we're going to negotiate, demand that they address their human rights situation as well. And so writing to your congressman, following this, and keeping Nasarin's name out. Again, I can't tell you enough how much having people talk about her in the news, having her name out there, people seeing the movie and knowing who she is and doing things about her or writing about her, just, blogging about her, tweeting about her, Instagram, Facebook, anything about her, actually is kind of a cloak of protection for her. It makes it much more difficult for the government, to really, go as far as they might.
Thanks, Marcia. Ozzy, one other question for you before we wrap up, which is, what are some actions we can take to improve gender equity here in the United States?
Well, let's see how I can answer that. That's a big question.
It's a big one.
I'm a strong believer of personal is political. And I think this statement really underscores the connection between personal experience as a female and larger economic, social, political systems. So I guess I would quickly mention 4 actions. One, as I mentioned, every woman needs a support system where she can talk about how sexism shows up in her life and how she is fighting misogyny, discrimination, harassment, and violence in her personal life. The second action, I would say that because sexism is systemic and global, ultimately personal actions will not eradicate the root causes of gender inequity. So we need to connect to the larger women's movement, feminist movement, and be part of organizations like Girl Rising or NGO CSW in New York, or there are millions of women's organizations on the local and national and international level. The third action, I think that we need to ask our governments to continue to implement Beijing Declaration of and Platform of Action and hold our governments accountable for results. So what is the Beijing Platform of Action? Very quickly, in 1995, over 30,000 activists, I was one of them, and 189 country representatives gathered in Beijing and made a commitment to achieve equality for women. This commitment and what came out of Beijing is the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action continues to be the most progressive blueprint ever for advancing women's rights. So even 21 years later, it remains a powerful source of guidance and inspiration. So But we have seen enormous improvement in the last 21 years in the lives of women and children and girls. But let me say that still no country has yet finished this agenda. So we need to push our governments, including United States, to really implement these actions. The fourth action is we need to protect women human rights defenders like Nasrin all around the globe. Women's movement and the UN recognize the women's rights defenders, recognize the work that they're doing in the world and what challenges they're facing. And we need to continue to hold our governments accountable for the safety of these defenders and on whose shoulder we stand. And I think Marcia spoke to that point. Thanks.
Ozzy, thank you so much. We are right at the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody, Women Have Wings, NGO, Commission on the Status of Women. Thank you for partnering with us. Marcia, to you and your filmmaking team, to Jeff, to all of the people that you worked with in Iran, thank you for making this film. Celine and Maya, thanks for being with us today. Please watch this film. We've shared in the chat the links. You can find it on all the platforms. As we've talked about, it is an important film. It's an important story, and please share it widely in your communities. There were so many lines for me that stood out in this film, but one of them that speaks very much to what you just talked about, Ozzy, was this, that Nasrin said. I was reminded that not all power is in the hands of authorities. I think she said that at one point at a rally. And so what I would like to close with and call everyone to do on this call is to keep learning, learn about these issues, learn about how gender inequity exists in your country and around the world. Girl Rising has a lot of resources to help learn, to take action. And as Marcia said, and as Ozzy said, the small things that we do are the first step, and we have to take a first step before anything else comes. And there is so much that we can do to serve our communities and to fight for human rights. Sometimes it can feel like this daunting mountain that we can't possibly make a difference. But I feel like Nasrin's story and the story of all of the others that come around her and all of the people who are taking one step is such a powerful story about what we all can do and what our responsibility is. Because not all of the power is in the hands of the authorities. So let's take our power as we should and step into fighting for equal rights for all. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. And we hope to see you again on another event. Thank you so much. And again, Marcia, thank you so much for this film.
Thank you. And
Ozzy,
thank you also to
Maya, thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye, Selena.